Okay, so welcome to the second class of our scientific socialism course. This class is on money, and thank you everyone for attending. And I'm Ruben, by the way. So, as we talked about in our last class, capitalist society is defined, or our general definition of capitalist society is a society of generalized commodity production, in which the production of commodities, that is, goods made to be sold and exchanged on a market, not to be used by the producers, is the defining characteristic of capital societies. But within this, and then within a specific commodity, within each commodity, we see two particular things. We have a use value, as in within each particular commodity, for each person or person it uses for, the applications by which they could use it. For example, coffee beans. For me, the buyer of the coffee beans, their use value is the coffee that I can have with them that will wake me up. And then they also have an exchange value, and this exchange value is basically determined as the equivalent on the market in the process of exchange, which is where commodities are exchanged on a market, as I said before. The exchange value is the equivalent of that commodity in other commodities. And the way that exchange value is determined and use value is determined is through value proper, which emerges out of the dialectical relationship between exchange value and use value. And this value proper embodies the socially necessary abstract labor hours that we described in the last tutorial in a commodity. Just so the average number of hours it takes to produce, for say, coffee beans, so the growing of coffee beans, the harvesting of coffee beans, so the sowing of the seeds, the harvesting of the beans, the moving of the beans to the marketplace. So the average amount of time it takes to do all of that is the abstract socially necessary time, and it's like I could be doing that very fast. So there could be people who do it in average of 10 hours of abstract labor time or whatever. But if I do it in 50 hours, or like one random person does it in 50 hours, but the vast majority of industrialized production is 10 hours. The average would be something like 10.05 hours or something. And that will determine the value proper of those items. But the other important thing of this is that for this value to be realized, it has to be recognized as socially valid. And in this recognition of a value of a commodity as socially valid means that somebody else on the market sees it as a use value. And that's where we come to this relation between exchange and use value. For it to be exchanged, it has to have a use value, not to the person who's selling the commodity. So a cash crop farmer selling a commodity, they're just making loads and loads of coffee beans. They're producing those coffee beans primarily not to get other commodities. But for me, I have a use value of those coffee beans, so those coffee beans can be realized on the market by people willing to buy them. But this, in the marketplace, is where this object of money emerges. Money emerges out of the process of commodity exchange. And while money and commodity exchange have existed in past societies, it is in a society of generalized commodity exchange where the majority of production is used for the production of goods for sale on the market, hence a capitalist society that requires this relation of money. So what is money? So money has several characteristics. The primary characteristic of money is money as the universal equivalent commodity. So the commodity that can be exchanged for any other commodity. There's various forms as such. And the way the primary text terms this is as the monopolist of buying power. So if the coffee grower takes their coffee to the market, the coffee buyer is the wielder of this money universal equivalent commodity, and they can exchange that for the coffee. But the way this realizes itself in an abstract relation is the relation C, commodity, to M, money, representing to C dash, which is other commodities. Because if we think about this from the perspective of the coffee grower, the reason that they are selling their coffee on the market is to get other commodities they need to survive. So, because in generalized commodity society, commodities such as food, shelter, and other luxury and wage goods, as a such thing like like buying internet access and all these things, those are all things that's the reason, that's the use value on the market being sought by the coffee beans, in this particular scenario, but by the private commodity producer. Other commodities are the reason that they are bringing their commodity to the market and selling it. And money, as the action of universal exchange, allows for them to bring their commodity to the market and realize the value of their commodity in the form of other commodities. They sell their commodity for money, M, hence C-M, and then they use that realized value of their commodity in M-C to attain those means of subsistence and other such things they need. That is the role of money as a universal equivalent. And from this role is where a lot of the other relations that money is involved in, those we can build out of. So we also see money as, so as I said, money is the embodiment of social value. But because money the money is a universal equivalent, means the money holder can buy any commodity. This puts money as the monopolist of buying power, an instrument of social power, and allows for this relation of the production of capital. So in the production of capital, instead of CMC, we have MCM dash, which you've probably seen in the readings. So the capitalist, the money holder, approaches the market and buys commodities. So they buy labor power, means of production, and other commodity inputs. And these are transformed in the process of production into a new commodity, which, because of the value of, we may have talked about before, we will definitely talk about later, of labor power as a commodity that the worker is going to the market to sell, which we'll interrogate a little bit. It can transform. And add value if it's recognized as socially necessary. And then the capitalist goes to the market again and sells this commodity M dash for more than the inputs that they put into it, more than the labor power, means of production, and other raw inputs. So they make a sale, which is M dash, which increases the amount of money, and this cycle continues. So that is money as capital. And money also functions kind of in an extension of as well that. And then we see, sorry, I'm going to ramble that. And then the reason that the worker is selling in C, their labor power. So labor power, just to explain it briefly, it's a separate, it is a commodity. It's in terms of abstract labor hours. So they're paying for labor power for a certain amount of time is what the capitalist is buying, not the actual value produced. Hence it's being exchanged for its exchange value, which is determined if we go back to our CMC dash relation. We can see that. So let's imagine the labor power holder, the worker, as having C labor power. They sell C for M money in the form of wages, and this goes to C dash, which they need wage goods because as a proletarian they're dispossessed of the means of subsistence. They need food and other such things to survive. So they have to sell their money. Thus, money as the monopolist of social value and labor power forces workers to sell their power or sell their labor power to the capitalist, allowing this capitalist extraction of surplus value. And now we can go off this because money also has another role, which is as a store of value. So this is essentially hoarding, which is described in the main text. And when money is hoarded, it can be invested in profitable cycles of capital. So this is called finance capital. So industrial capital is, as we described there, that cycle. MCM, so the person running the production of those commodities, buying those commodities, selling those commodities. And finance capital is hoarded capital, which has been siphoned off from this M dash stage where more and more capital is being produced, or money capital, after this accumulation. It's siphoned off as a store of value, which is loaned to the industrial capitalist to buy these things in exchange for a money rent. So that is finance capital. And this plays a role in the creation of these large bureaucracies of finances and banks and whatever. They exist, functioning. They do other things as well, but their primary means of thing is extracting value in a rentier form as interest from this relation. Value. Yeah, all right. Thank you. I'll just double check quickly that you haven't missed anything. Wonderful. Any questions on terms, clarifications?
Did you cover commodity money?
Yeah, so money is a universal equivalent commodity. So I think I briefly brushed over it, but it can have lots of forms. It's like bank money, currency money, essentially, all these other things. And initially money takes the form of essentially gold, basically, or another precious metal.
Right, so that's commodity money.
That's
and then
commodity money.
Does it go on to become symbolic money?
So in the process of extraction, because in the process of generalized commodity exchange, more and more money is needed. So when it's kind of a complicated relationship, but it's like, so there's money, and there's a certain supply of this money commodity, gold or whatever, or another money commodity, which is basically just decided by the availability of various commodities in the particular market relation circumstances, which the generalized commodity exchange occurs. So, for example, in China, actually there wasn't generalized commodity exchange in China, but there was commodity exchange. But in the Chinese commodity exchange, silver was the primary value of money, whereas in European money exchange, initially it was silver, but then with the discovery of new gold reserves, it became gold. But how it worked was, everyone, because of the circumstances of the market, there's a generally agreed upon use to use this particular thing or use this particular good as the good that can buy other goods, because the larger commodity producers say we will accept this good, and that determines how other commodity producers affect things. And and like it's a good bit of realism in supply, because changing the supply of this commodity money, changing the supply of this commodity money is essentially changing the relations of, or like changing the value. It changes the relative differences between money, but because money is just a measure of value, this doesn't really change doesn't change the values of goods. It just changes their prices. So the exchange values remain the same, but so in terms of if somebody's selling coffee, and the relation of coffee and let's say bananas, if we increase the amount of gold or the amount of printed money in the system, the actual relation and hold constant the amount of coffee and the amount of bananas, the exchange values of those coffee and bananas will remain the same. The amount of abstract labor hours needed to produce both of them, that's the ratio between them, remain the same. Just the terms in which it's expressed in gold will go up. So there's more gold. And this is kind of how inflation works as well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Inflation can also work if the cost of, or the relative value of commodities decreases. So if we have a productivity increase, so let's say during the Industrial Revolution and stuff, the amount of abstract labor hours taken to produce most commodities has drastically decreased. But the amount of money in circulation, and if the amount of money in so that means that the relative values in terms of abstract labor hours, which is a measure of value, has decreased. But if the amount of money remains the same or increases, or if the amount of money remains the same, well, the values of commodities decrease, and the value of labor power, or the cost of labor power, also decreases with a decrease in the cost of commodities, because labor power is a commodity. That will mean an increase in the gold cost of those, because the amount of gold has remained the same, or the amount of money in the system has remained the same. Does that make sense? Or do you want me to clarify that?
Yes, please.
So, in these, so let's say,
I kind of get it.
Example. So, the prices, the actual amount of labor it takes to produce t-shirts, and just t-shirts, shirts, all clothes, basically, halves. But the amount of money remains the same in the system. So the value of everything is halved, but the amount of money is the same.
Yep. Okay.
So now this half value is expressed as double the amount of money it was before.
Right. Okay.
It's quite confusing. I need to pull up my reference book as well, but you kind of get it?
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
I might have made a massive mistake and said it the wrong way around or something. I'm quite tired, sorry. So if something does seem weird, just go, that seems weird, and it'll be weird. Any other questions, Serena, or things about stuff I was saying?
So it's not, I don't know if this is really related, but in terms of the value, how is the value or price of something calculated? Do the capitalists calculate it through I guess calculating, I don't know, an average of what consumers pay for certain commodities and whatnot? How is value determined?
So
it's abstract.
Importantly, talking about these different things, I've got to go back to And this is why Marx starts his analysis of capitalist production with the commodity. So we've got to go back to the forms of the commodity, which is use value, and exchange value becoming proper value, or value, like this social concept of value, which importantly only functions during capitalism. This doesn't exist really within non-capitalist forms of production. And importantly, just a distinction, price and exchange value are separate things. So exchange value is price when supply and demand are in equilibrium. So prices can fluctuate due to market fluctuations in supply and demand. But when supply and demand are in equilibrium, exchange value is the determinant. So it's like the average.
Okay.
So exchange value is the relative value of any commodity against other commodities.
Yeah. Right, okay.
And the use value is for a particular individual the things they can use a commodity for. For a commodity to have value properly, it has to be exchanged on the market with a recognized equal value, for a commodity of a recognized equal value. And remembering money is a commodity in this sense. So all money is representation of commodity, representation of value. Just importantly, just sorry, to quick tangent back to commodity money. All money is a commodity, and as generalized commodity production becomes more entrenched, it loses its need for this general monetary forms. It's something that arises out of market relations and needed for market relations. And because states ensure the ability of market relations to occur, so that initially was maintaining gold reserves, but it's no longer required. It's stuff like ensuring private property relations, enforcing contracts and deals and that such. That power of the state relegates and really redundantizes the need for a metallic commodity money. All right, so back to use and exchange value. So value proper is measured in abstract, socially abstract labor. So if a coat takes twice the socially abstract labor power to produce as a rain jacket, the coat will have double the value of a rain jacket. But for that to be realized, so that socially, on average, so that abstract labor hours to be realized as socially necessary, on the market, others have to have use values, have to have a use value for a coat. So there needs to be a demand for coats, basically, or a need for coats. There needs to be a want or need for coats. And then using money that is realized as an exchange between this universal commodity embodiment of value, which mean exchange for the coat, which then gives back the capitalist this money value. And then money in this, it doesn't matter as much what's happening if the value of money is decreasing or increasing. It's more about this. The essence of money is the essence of value are socially abstract labor hours and what's deemed as socially necessary in this contradiction between use and exchange values. So like capitalists will always try and get the highest price for their commodities, or they'll try and realize their commodities in the market for the best price, depending on market conditions and whatnot. But ultimately, the exchange value remains based on this concept of realizing use values and realize wants and needs, and the abstract labor time that it takes to produce commodities. And then, like inflation is essentially, it's about it's generally an aspect of class struggle, decreasing or increasing relative wages, basically, and other such things. But I think we'll talk about it later in this course, I think. Let's double check. Yeah, and like distribution of products and other such things. We'll talk about how inflation works. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Wonderful. You have any more questions, Em, or any questions, Serena?
No, not really.
Okay. Wonderful. We'll move into the discussions questions now. So the first discussion question is, what is money? What are its functions within a market economy?
So basically money acts as like, I guess, the medium for like exchanging commodities, because like in the required readings, capitalism can't really function on like a bartering basis. It needs like a commodity to be used for exchange. And it also serves multiple other purposes. I guess also for like hoarding, accumulation, all that. Yeah.
Anything to add, Seren?
Brain just switched off. So what were the points that we just discussed?
We're just talking about money and its function.
Oh yeah, I know. I mean, like, what was the answer already given? Because so I know if there's anything I can add.
Aim was talking about the function of money as a means of exchange. So in our cycle of CMC, money is facilitating the commodity, the producer of a commodity, the private commodity producer, facilitating their purchase, essentially, or their preparation of wants and needs in the forms of other commodities. So, for example, the wage commodity producer who sells their labor power, that sale of the commodity of their labor power for money, that money is a means of exchange for their means of subsistence. What are some other characteristics of money?
I guess there's also like a social aspect. How do I put this? It works in a way to kind of like shut out certain classes from certain kind of social relations. And I guess it kind of like cements that further class divide, I guess you could say. And it just makes, I don't know, would it be correct to say that it aids in like isolation?
Yeah, so if you've ever like walked around without money, you really feel that you're not part of commodities or like capitalist society, because capitalism is generalized commodity exchange. And if you don't have this monopolist of buying power, if you're without money, you are unable to interact with society that is based on the exchange of goods.
Yeah, and it gives like less social power as well.
Yeah, we'll talk about
and it can make the person who doesn't have as much basically subservient or more likely to be subservient to someone who has a lot more.
Yeah, because they need they need to fulfill that. They need to fulfill their needs in the form of other commodities. Thus, they have to produce their particular commodity in order to get those. Especially in society, especially for proletarians who are deprived of the means of subsistence. but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Surana, could you elaborate on the idea of money as capital? What role does money play in the process of the accumulation of capital?
Well, I mean, trying to think.
Do you remember the cycle we talked about just before, MCM dash?
MC.
So how does this money function in this cycle, MCM dash?
Yeah. I mean.
So the capitalist.
Yeah, it's the whole. Isn't it the whole idea? I mean, I know that money is something that can be like reinvested to generate more money, or I guess to buy more assets. I don't know how to give a generalized explanation of it.
So the capitalist enters the market with money, and they buy some commodities, which they'll then use. So with M, they buy some commodities, which they will then use in the process of production. And one of those commodities has to be labor power. And they'll use those commodities in the process of production to create another commodity, which they will then hope to realize for a value in M dash, in selling it on the market for money, which is greater than the initial amount of money they put in. And that is the accumulation of value and capital. And in this function, money is money capital, in that it's in its embodiment of social value. It is value in motion through this cycle of producing more of itself. Accumulation.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So, just to be honest, within like a capitalist society, I think that could be a better word than market economy. Money performs the role of universal equivalent commodity. It performs a role as a store of value. It performs a role as money capital, and it is also a means of exchange. So, moving on to the next question. How does money's role as the universal equivalent provide it considerable social power? I know you already went a little bit into this, and how does the character of the market mask money's power? So there's two parts to that question.
Sorry, can you repeat the first part?
These are in socialism school, if you can't hear me or something, whatever. So the first part is how does money's role as the universal equivalent provide it considerable social power?
Okay. I guess it gives like the illusion of how do I explain it? It gives the illusion of being able to, I guess, fairly barter or negotiate a price as like a right. And it kind of it masks basically the fact that there's not really a choice in like what you pay. I don't know. I don't really know how to answer that question.
You're on that. You're on the
right track.
Yeah, so I can expand on what you were saying if you want, but you can.
Yeah, like it's hard to explain. It would seem fair to like the average person that doesn't really like think about it, that you earn money and then your hard-earned money you get to spend it, but people don't really like see all the social relations that come from having money, and the status and how it relates back to class.
Yeah, and it goes back to the phenomenon we were talking about in the previous class, which is commodity fetishization as well, which removes the abstract labor behind the money. All we see is this exchange of commodities within the market with money at the center of it. And the money holder, as we've already examined, is the one who's able to complete the cycle of capital accumulation, and thus increase their money. And they're the sole buyer of other commodities. And in a commodity exchange, you can see the money holder, because money is a store of value, as long as that money is accepted as value, of course, is in a more powerful position than the commodity seller. Because if that commodity seller's commodity can't be realized as money, then it is not valued at all.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the market, yeah, like you were saying, these ideas of exchange, or like equality in exchange, like a free exchange, but with this power and property of money, and also the functions of commodity production, and that you're forced to exchange commodities to be able to survive, and generalized commodity production of society masks the power of money and the class aspects, like you were saying, Anne. Do you have anything else to say on that, Suranna?
I mean, I guess not really.
Would you like to you imagine?
I feel.
Oh, sorry. What are you saying,
Anne? So I don't know. I think this is on the right track, but like it also kind of, we get so used to like purchasing these commodities, and we don't really think about where they come from. So like, for instance, stuff like chocolate and those other like confectionaries, they're often sourced from places with like forced labor, and even with regards to like jewelry, you know. Yeah, it completely hides that. We don't see like the workers. We only see like the commodity. It like just almost appears out of thin air, you know, in metaphorically speaking.
In this relation, and that you're describing, we did talk about in the last class, is commodity fetishism, and it's essentially the germ of bourgeois ideology that this commodity is this eternal structure. Market relations are constant of human society, and the market is the basis and commencement of all exchange. And they see labor and production as just an exchange and nothing else happening. Yeah, it's really interesting. Suranna, and it also has like implications of political work and stuff. So Suranna, well, how would you say like the authority of money, like as the ability to buy means of subsistence, the ability to buy goods and other interactions in capitalist society, how does that confer social power onto the money holder?
I mean, it sort of seems self-explanatory. If you have more money, you have more commodities to exchange it with.
You can expand on that, like the implications of that, when because like the implications of, due to the process of capital accumulation, individuals accumulating vast amounts of money capital.
I mean, it's sort of like, the whole idea of wealth in terms of public consciousness is about money you have. Like, if you want to know how rich someone is, you look at their net worth.
Yeah, it's good. It's a measure of social power and status. It's like the more money you have, the more command you have over the direction of commodities in society, the more governing you have over what is a use value, as in you can choose to make things use values, you can realize the value of particular commodities, the more control you have over the wants and needs of those society, like the production of new desires within those societies for commodities, for things like advertising and all this stuff. Yeah, so it's the thing. And then also, which we'll get into the next question, which is about well, actually so how does money intensify the alienated power of capital over labor?
I guess intensify the power of capital over the labor. Could you expand on that a bit more? Like, what is capital over labor? Like, are they talking about... I don't know, I'm a bit confused by the question.
Yeah, it's a pretty complex question. So basically, the alienated power of capital over labor is referring to not generally, so not like the specific tyrannical power of the capitalist over the wage laborer in the process of production. So like the capitalist can buy any wage laborer to produce their thing. They don't need to produce the commodity, whereas the wage laborer needs the money to survive. So the capitalist has tyrannical power over the wage laborer, but in a generalized sense, the relation of production, so both the cycles of MC, M dash, and CMC, meaning that money is capital, determines and governs what labor must do. Labor must sell, otherwise it dies, or otherwise it can't reproduce itself. So labor must sell itself for its socially recognized value. And how does, I guess I'm kind of answering the question now, so I'll just go for it. But money, so money increases this value instead of it being a direct barter, which never could really exist for good. That's basically slavery. That's a condition of slavery. But money allows for this relation to exist and constantly increases it. In laws we have, in the accumulation of profits, and because of the tendency for the rate of profit to decline, capital squeezes more and more relative surplus labor. But we're going to talk about this in the next lesson, but capitalists squeezes more and more relative surplus value out of the workers. So even if workers' wages and the standard of living is increasing because the prices of other commodities, of wage goods, or the values of wage goods, are dropping faster than the value of labor, because the value of labor power drop. Because the value of labor power, as we already kind of described and we'll describe later, is the amount of commodities deemed socially necessary and the amount required to reproduce that labor. So all the things that you need to survive, like food, water, fuel, etc., but also within the particular societal context, all the things that are deemed socially necessary. So in our society, the internet is deemed socially necessary. So you need to, from your wages, be able to afford the internet. You need to be able to afford a phone and devices and applications and other such things. So all of those are deemed, that's all part of the cost of wage of that. So if the cost of all those commodities falls faster, so does the actual cost of, if the value of all those commodities falls, as does the value of wage labor. And that happens when productivity increases. So people can produce more commodities in less time, basically. So like a machine doubles the amount of commodities an average worker can produce in an hour, for example. Whereas capital still gets to extract surplus value in that relation. So the amount of money capital is constantly increasing, and the giving out of this money capital as wages as a relative portion decreases. So it means people are more and more dependent upon this. And also, as capital's a totality, it needs to expand because it's accumulating, and accumulating in society, it needs new markets, new needs, new commodities to produce to continue to realize profit, so to be able to continue to sell commodities. So it has to expand further. So it takes over more and more sectors of society. So like healthcare, for example, or roads, other ridiculous things like that. Those are two examples of things that are being taken over by capital in Australia. And thus workers are more and more dependent upon money for more relations. Sorry, I was rambling about that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Wonderful. So the last question is, how does the relationship between money and other commodities reflect in the relationship between capital and labor and between finance capital and other capitals? So, and this relationship is money, as the text says, as the monopolist of buying power. Surrounding, would you like to have a go?
I mean, I guess the relationship between money and other commodities. I mean,
So I can't quite hear you.
I'm not really sure how to answer that. Because I have.
You get to have a go. There's no problem with doing it.
I have comments in my head, but I don't know if any of them are right in any way. I mean, I guess.
Go say it.
Because, I know that money is used as, I guess, the universal exchange equivalent, but in terms of relationship between capital and labor,
so
I don't know.
So in the relationship between money and other commodities, as we kind of touched on before, only the money holder gets to decide if commodities have value or not. So the money, as the monopolist of buying power, essentially determines what is socially necessary and what is not. And then in the money holder. So money has this dominating relationship over other commodities. Similarly, in the relationship between capital and labor, can you see where the similarity would be, Anne?
Between capital and labor?
So in that dominating relationship money has over other commodities.
Yeah. Haven't we like, doesn't this kind of go back to everything else we were talking about before?
Yeah.
Like there's the social aspect, there's the aspect in terms of like where the labour comes from, with regards to like the people not only making the commodity, but then, I guess people who get hired, and then it kind of like circulates. It's almost like a vicious circle, and it kind of like, it all reinforces itself, I guess. Is that right?
Yeah. So in this relationship between money and money and commodities, but in the relationship between labor and capital, labor needs to fulfill the CMC cycle to get the means of subsistence. So, and money and capital is what provides the M in that CMC cycle. So thus capital has a dominating relationship, and it's the monopolist on what and where labor power is used, because labor power acquires that capital in the form of money.
Right, so basically, yeah, so society doesn't really get to choose where that labor goes into, it's decided by like private individuals who hold that wealth or that capital.
Well, as an abstraction, society does get to choose because society is paid like there's still wage workers. Wage workers get paid wages, and some of those wages go into other things that are decided as necessary, like the internet or other such things. But
like
as like a general term, but because value is the embodiment of social power and social buying power is embodied in money, the money holder has a disproportionate control over what that means. Is what you're getting at, and
that's what I mean. Like they can manipulate like what people see as like necessary. Obviously, the internet is like one of those things that's necessary in today's age, but then there's also people that will buy like other things that aren't necessarily like necessary. You know, like it's a very consumerist kind of attitude. You know.
Yeah, well, what is necessary and what is not is determined socially. But for example, luxury. So there's a difference between luxury and wage goods that Marx makes, and luxury goods, especially by capital owners, are things like jewelry and other such things, which they use their money as a store of value accumulated from that process of capital accumulation, MCM dash, to buy. And I think the opening line of Marx's Capital is that the wealth. I'll just make sure I get it right. The wealth of societies in which the capitalist mode of production prevails appears in an immense collection of commodities. So the wealth.
Did you just say capitalist mode of production?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, isn't that because like? Because
no, I'm saying that. Yeah. I'm just like quoting Marx to support what you said. Or like relating to it. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Because like, even though it is kind of like you said, socially determined, wouldn't that also be influenced by the money holders?
Yeah, it's all influenced by money holders.
Yeah.
And money holders' wealth and power appears in money, which is accumulation of commodities, but also these luxury goods, like luxury commodities like jewelry, luxury yachts, whatever.
Houses, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All those,
that makes sense.
All those sort of things. All right, and then we go on to the second part of this question, which is the relationship between finance capital and other capitals. So finance capital, industrial capital. So Rana, do you remember what would you like to like give an idea of what finance capital and industrial capital is?
I mean, finance capital, isn't that mostly referring to the banks and things that hold and distribute the money?
Yeah, that's great.
And then the industrial capitalists, they take that money, they finance that money and then try to put that towards to production, to accumulation. And so usually, like I guess especially today, a lot of things are financed by debt. So businesses, industrial capitalists are both at the whims of their own desire for profit and also the desire of profit of the people that they financed their money from.
Yeah, that's right. And so could you relate this to like how we've talked about the relationship between money and other commodities? So if in the MCM dash cycle, finance capital is providing a large part of the M and extracting part of the M dash, or extracting part of the surplus produced. How does that relate to like the relationship between money and other commodities?
I mean, I guess it's sort of the thing with the finance capitalists sort of impose themselves on all of other capitalists because they ultimately hold and distribute their money, including their bank accounts. And if you if you screw with the banks, you're not going to have a business anymore. So, I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. So because finance capital, just like capital, it's basically because it holds money as the universal equivalent. It is able to determine what what industrial capitalist projects get funded, but it will invest in the ones with higher rates of profit, and this leads to an equalization of the rate and profit and stuff. But we'll talk about this later, or in later lessons. But yeah, finance capital is the same controlling relation over industrial capital that we see with essentially capital over labor and money over other commodities. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Any other questions or thoughts, Aim or Serena?
No, not really.
Don't think so.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, thank you guys for coming to this tutorial, engaging with the questions and other such things, and responding and stuff. This is recorded. Is it okay if we post the recording? But I think it went pretty well as like a sample discussion.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Serena?
Yeah, that's alright.
Yeah, cool. So next week's, I'll post the readings for next week's thing after tomorrow's tutorial, which is the same. You don't have to attend that one. It's exactly the same thing again. Which will be, where did I find it? It will be on something else. Let me just double check actually. Bloody hell. Socialism School. Two seconds, please. Loading. Okay. I should have had this document open so I could have told what's it. Oh, it'll be on the division of labor. Will be the next class. I'll just tell you what the required readings are. So the required readings are the next two texts. So they're Diego Gruner, Capitalist Competition and Distribution of Profits, and Contesting the Labor Markets, both from the textbook. And then there's some supplementary readings as well. Okay, and thanks for attending. So there'll be a tutorial on Monday at 7:30. You don't have to attend. And next week there'll be a tutorial at 7:30 again, same time, on Sunday and on Monday. Thanks for coming. I'll see you guys later.